So I was doing a lot of things in training for a really, really long time that I wasn't super thinking about. I'm always training something, like I'm always trying to add something or work on something in particular in my training. And it's this constant like reshuffling or like reorganizing of things that I'm doing. And sometimes it has really great results, and sometimes it's like I've been working on this for a really long time and it's not sticking, like it's not coming. So somewhat inspired by Thug Rose, who has like a mantra that she would tell herself to calm herself down in her fights. I thought it would be interesting to bring something in that's changing the things that I'm working on that are like, we're going to do something new, and to create an acronym out of it in order to kind of like have a checklist to go down in order to remind myself of these things that I wanted to work on, and just basically like throw something new into the machine and see what I can get out of it. So the things that I'm working on are seeing it, like really seeing where your strikes are going on a target, like in your mind, how that would be affecting your opponent. Crosses to the body rather than crosses to the face, so all crosses going to the body. Something that I've been working on a lot because of Karahat is when backing up, back up arrogantly. So, you know, instead of just kind of like getting more space, you kind of do this like, yeah, I'm going to back up, but it's kind of like an invitation or arrogance to like, I'm going to come back and then I'm going to come after you again, so that coming backwards is not a retreat. And then there's twice, so don't only throw one shot, always throw two at least. And then there's the head in, so this kind of protection, ducking, head ducking, and then everything is a step. So like you, Crew Thailand up in Pinsanchai, he's like, you step on everything. Like every single thing you do is a step, which to me is brilliant because it means that Muay Thai comes from your feet, which I think I've known for a long time, but haven't actually like addressed in my training prior to this. So the acronym is SCATHE. It requires a little bit of creative wording for what each of those things is, but by having an acronym, it's easy for me to remember it and kind of have it as a checklist. In working on it, I found it telling right away that you can't work on all of them all at once. Like you basically have to have your checklist as you're moving around and make adjustments towards it all the time, rather than like, these are the things that I work on only kinds of things. So for example, in shadow boxing, right? So for seeing it, for years, when I was shadow boxing, it was very meaningless, my shadow boxing. I don't picture an opponent. I don't really think about like what my strikes are doing, and I do this like 1-2 thing that I don't think I've ever thrown a 1-2 in any of my 205 fights. I'm not a 1-2 fighter, so to throw 1-2 every day for like 10 minutes every day, throwing this 1-2 that I'm never actually going to throw in a fight, by seeing it, either I'll bring that into a fight because I've seen it, and so it's this like, once you've visualized it, then you can bring it into action, or see things that you've seen and like bring it into your shadow boxing that way. So it's like things that you know that you're more tended towards. So by actually seeing the things that I'm doing, right? So if I'm going to see my knee coming to an opponent, rather than just like throwing the knee and like, you know, I'm throwing a knee because I'm trying to be really loose, I have to picture how much distance I actually have to cover. I have to picture that I have to be protected on my way in for that knee, and I have to picture what would set that up. So all of these things that are very contextual have to come into stuff that I do every single day in my shadow boxing, right? So if I'm going to be throwing my jab and I want to be doing like a chart-chai jab, I have to see my fist affecting somebody or not landing on them, but that jab is working my way in. So seeing all of those elements totally changes the meaning of everything I'm doing in shadow boxing or on the bag. And when you're hitting pads, I have a hard time grafting pad work onto hitting a person, because to me it's different body mapping and I'm totally willing to hit a pad, whereas I'm not super willing to hit a person in the same way. If when I'm hitting Pinu in the belly pad, I'm actually picturing hitting a person and how they would like respond to that, it collapses the difference between those two things. So that if you're going to practice walking on like a balance beam that's on the ground, but you picture a 40-foot drop below you, when you finally get on a beam that's the same width with a 40-foot drop between you, you've seen it. Like, you're like, oh no, I've done this before. So that's the importance of seeing it. Crosses to the body kind of came about because I don't throw crosses to the face in fights. I throw them all the time on the bag, in training, in pad work, and in shadow, but I just don't do it in fights because my body positioning, I end up kind of like widening myself and kind of like, because I haven't practiced seeing things, like I don't find my way to the right distance. But I have been throwing punches to the body a little bit more in fights. They haven't been crosses, but I'm also afraid of throwing crosses to the body. It's something that I have anxiety over. So by throwing every single cross that I throw to the body, which again, if you're going to be doing 1-2 like 70% of the time, and you have to change that to 1-2, it changes a lot of things. You have to think about it all of a sudden. One of the biggest things about Karahat changing my stance, I'm naturally right-handed, by going like this, you kind of become a beginner again. It doesn't mean you're off balance, it doesn't mean you can't do the same things, but you have to think about things in a way very akin to being a beginner when you first start, when you don't know how those movements go, you haven't felt them. When you go like this, you suddenly have to be more aware of everything you're doing, and to me that's really good. Like, having the skill level and the experience that I have, and then forcing myself to have to think like a beginner again, has really opened a lot of possibilities for me. And that's the same thing with this throwing across to the body all the time, is that I have to think about it. I'm not thinking when I do that. Whereas if I have to go like this, I have to think about it. And so throwing the crosses to the body and, you know, working on elbows and different things like that, that's all forcing me to think in a way that I think is very helpful in shaping the things that I'm working on. The arrogant backup that I was talking about with Kara, I love this so much. I find it really hard, actually, because I will fall off of things or step off of things, or like I'll be, you know, shadowboxing and doing my thing, and then I'll just kind of reset. Resetting doesn't help you at all. If you need to reset, perform your reset, right? So if I'm shadowboxing and I'm like doing my stuff, I'm like bong, bong, and I need to back up with arrogance or purpose. That's like, are you gonna follow me? Like, are you gonna come after me, rather than like, and back to the position that I started in. Start again, oh, I'm gonna back up. Again, it's forcing you to think. It's forcing you to engage with all the decisions that you're making when you're practicing these things for hours and hours and hours a day. Twice is easy enough. Lots of people work on throwing 2 rather than 1. Throwing single shots is something that I think just kind of shortens your resetting moments. Like, you're always resetting, rather than like if you have to throw 2 or 3, you feel how things actually kind of combine with each other, and then you can like use that arrogant backup or change positions or something and start again. So it's kind of like the stacking idea, where like you have a stack, which like it starts with your jab, and then you can like throw a combination off of it. And if someone interrupts you, you have to like start over. If you're used to throwing 1 strike, you're starting over all the time. And if you're facing someone who like really interrupts you, like if you're facing like Ramba, who is just going to constantly be stinging you, you're always starting over from 0, like not even from your jab. Like you can't even start. It's like the turning the engine and it just won't turn in your car. It's and you like can't start. Whereas if you kind of train yourself to use strikes to get to other strikes, you're less interrupted. You can continue past things even when you're interrupted in the middle of those things. So I find that really good. The head in is, I have a few cuts over my time in Thailand. I don't necessarily come in like with my head up, but it might as well be like this, because the difference between this and this is basically with your head up. So my last few stitches have been in my scalp, which is actually really good. That's what it's supposed to be. So you kind of want to be like, as you're coming in, like as you're closing distance, you basically want to be giving people the top part of your head in case you get hit by anything, or as like a defense. You'll see boxers do this. Boxers get hit like on their crown all the time as they're like coming in. We have elbows in Muay Thai, so it's really important to duck down, and you can't just do this like peekaboo thing because this is all open. So you have to duck into your shoulders a lot, and you have to train that. Like, it's not something that like, oh well, we don't train with elbows and like I get hit in training, it's not that big a deal. You have to train the trigger of like getting down and protected as you're moving. So as much as you practice something like you're gonna block, right? You're gonna like block because someone's gonna kick you. You have to picture as you're closing that distance, the closer you get, the more you need to be ready to duck down to cover that distance. So it's the same thing of like, if you're this far away from someone in boxing, you're not gonna be like doing this head movement from this far away because nobody's hitting you. And you don't have to be like this from this far away because nobody's hitting you. But if you start from here, as you come in, that's when your guard comes up. So not only do things need to come up, you need to come down. It's like you're going into your cage or something, right? So as you close distance, that's how you like come down. So I'm training that trigger. So as the bag is swinging, as it's coming towards me, it's a duck. If I'm coming towards the bag, it's a duck. So it's this kind of like training all of this kind of, right? So that you know that you train how the distance and the protection like co-time each other. And the last thing is everything is a step. So Kevin and I have been talking about this thing that like fight with your feet. This is like profound. So I get all off balance and stuff when I'm like concentrating on the technique or the strike or whatever the thing is. Like if someone is holding pads for me, especially, like if I'm totally in control myself, if I'm shadow boxing or if I'm against a bag, my balance is pretty good, and like I can concentrate on my chart chai, like that shoulder is turning and everything's really like by the book, in the rules. The minute you have to like hit someone else's target or someone is like crowding you or anything, I like get wider, I get off balance. I'm like, why am I not doing the same thing in pad work that I'm doing on the bag or in shadow when I have full control of everything? And it makes sense, it's pressure, it's all these different things. What's crazy about it is that the number of times that I've worked with Chat Chai, who's a former WBC champion, and he's the one who really taught me this like weight transfer. When I'm working with him and I start getting wonky and I can like feel that my power is getting cut by like breaking my frame, I'll laugh and I'll say to him, because I'm using my hands, I forget about my legs. I think punching has fuck all to do with your hands, which it doesn't. These are like making the impact, but it's like thinking that a bullet is what fires a gun. Like all of your aiming and breathing and squeezing of the trigger and like the kickback, everything that has to do with shooting has nothing to do with the bullet. The bullet hits the target, it gets shot out, whatever. You don't think about the bullet at all when you're shooting a gun. It's the same thing with firing strikes. A punch doesn't come from your fist. A punch doesn't even really come from your arm. It kind of comes from your shoulder, but everything comes from your feet. So if you want power and balance and kind of like everything to flow together, it all comes from your feet. And we forget about it because we're like, punching is your hand. It doesn't do it. Which is the same thing when I go into pad work. I'm thinking, hit the target, and so I end up doing this like swimming thing. Whereas if I'm like, okay, fight with your feet, I know, my arms know what to do. I don't have to think about my arms going. Like I know that if I'm gonna punch that, it's gonna go like this. What I need to think about is my foot allowing the balance to come on those different things that I'm doing. So you have to step. Everything is a step, right? So step for the knee, step for the punch, step for the punch, step for the elbow. Everything is this like marching thing. When I watch Chart Thai, when he's like shadowing something to show me how it's supposed to go, and like my face is melting because it's so pretty, he looks like a K-pop dance video or something, the way that he'll drop his hands. He's showing me punching, but it's footwork. He'll drop his hands and he's just doing this to show like how things like swim across, right? So it's like bop, bop, and it's just coming from his feet. And he's showing me exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. So, as True Thailand said from Santai in Chiang Mai, everything is a step. It doesn't mean everything's a big step. It just means everything moves, right? So even if you're just doing like a forward elbow, see how I didn't step on that? And I'm just like leaning my weight forward? Bop. That has balance. Bop. That has power. Bop. You don't want to be like swaying on things. You want to be taking these small like bongs. It's very like Tai Chi, like power coming from the bottom, which conceptually makes a lot of sense to me. Like if you're going to build something, you don't build it from the top, like you build it from the bottom. So everything has to be like stable and composed from the feet. So everything as a step reminds me to fight with my feet. So if I'm kind of like, why am I so off balance? It's like, okay, everything that you're doing, you don't have to worry about your hands. They know how to punch. Worry about what your feet are doing, like where your feet are going as you're trying to do things. So that's my checklist. I can't do all of them all at once, but sometimes as I'm doing something and I'm like backing up to here, I'm like, back up with arrogance, just do it again, right? Just do it again. Be aware of it, try again.